I bought a house in Philadelphia, and I was driving from Philly to Staten Island for my classes with my then 3-year-old son, who also got sick. Anything that could happen in the middle of my 5 years, it took 5 years to get this. My son got sick after he was born, and we were in a hospital for 2.5 months for surgeries that he needed. So I was living in the hospital, but I couldn't not go to school because I'd lose my scholarship. So I met this guy at a table trying to bid a woman-owned business construction company. And he's like, "Oh, I'm a real estate agent." I'm like, "Oh, so am I." And he's like, "Oh, so what have you sold?" And I'm like, "Nothing yet." And he was like, "Well, what do you, how are you getting business?" And I whipped out my little computer and I was like, "Well, I made this CRM and I made this website and I did all these beautiful flyers." And he's like, "How many contracts have you signed?" And I'm like, "None." And he's like, "Well, 0% of zero is still zero, right?" I got sick when I first moved here. Turns out my second pregnancy was not friends with my heart. So the first year I got here, I really couldn't work. I was trying to work. I didn't know I was sick. I didn't know my market. I didn't know any people. I have to say this about myself. I go into everything bright-eyed. Like, I'm going to make this happen. Look at my hair. Like, I walk around like this all the time. I am not flashy. I care about my people. I care about my business. I care about my family, and people know that.
Yeah.
And I'll never
You're a
be shy.
resource to them.
And I love being a resource.
That's
I love being able to help. I love my guys. I love my vendors. Like, they are.
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using NewCalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Melissa Horne, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and then we want to talk about some of the amazing things that you're doing in Florida, right, in real estate. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to share my story with you.
I'm guessing you're from New York, but you tell me, where were you born?
We gave it away. I was born in New York. I'm a Queens kid.
Yeah.
I lived my whole life there. I left a couple of times, but I always ran home.
Yeah.
And now I'm in Florida, and this is my new home. I'm very happy here.
So how long have you been in Florida?
Since 2017.
Gotcha. So question for you. Growing up in Queens, which is, by the way, from what I understand, a great place to grow up. What was your favorite thing about growing up there?
Culture, learning culture. Definitely.
Like diversity?
Diversity. I never lived in a house more than only once. I lived in a house for 5 years, but we moved like every 3 years. Wow. So I didn't go to like one school or one neighborhood. A lot of people from New York that grew up in the boroughs stayed in that same neighborhood for their whole life, the same friends, the same neighbors. So when I talk about home, New York is through and through my home. But I consider like the sidewalks and the train and the different stores, all of it is my identity. So
question for you. Who was the most influential person to you growing up?
Probably my grandmother when I was younger. Yeah, I spent the most time with her. And I think I was the most honest with her. She loved me the most. She told me I was number one all the time. So
nothing like unconditional love, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think my grandmother. But there are a lot of people that definitely influence who I've become along the way
Yeah.
for different reasons. But I think if I had to name one person from my childhood, it would be my grandmother.
So you went to high school in Queens?
I went to high school in Queens. I went to 2 different high schools, and then I dropped out. I have a GED.
Wow. Okay, hold
Mhm.
on. I want that story, but hold on. In school, in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
I didn't really go to school that much in high school. That's, but English. English was always my favorite subject. I was a writer. I always journaled from when I was very, very little. I was always, words are very important to me. Language is all languages, not just English. The strength behind words and what they carry of you are
Mhm.
very, very important to me always at a young age, even though I was not an academic by high school. There's a story there that we'll
Mhm.
get back to, but I always had a curiosity and love for language.
Yeah. Question for you.
Mhm.
Did you have a favorite teacher in high school?
No, you'll have to go before high school. High
We
school
can
was
go before high school.
yeah,
It's okay.
the rebellious teenager in all facets that anyone has ever known is sitting right here in front of you. 100%. They're, looking back, let me tell you, when I had my own children, especially when my older son became a teenager, is when I apologized to my mom
Wow.
because he wasn't even a slight, like even a touch of what I was, and I had a difficult time. So
Yeah.
it made me and my mom much closer once I realized what I put her through. However, before high school, who is my favorite teacher? I moved so much that I didn't really get the opportunity to form those closenesses and any of those kind of connections in school.
Yeah. That's
It
okay.
was it was more, I loved moving. I would get ants in my pants after the 3 years myself, like my mom did.
Mhm.
Um, and I was really excited to reinvent myself for whatever. I don't know why she moved so much, but it translated into my adult life that I was very excited to learn about new people and new places. Um, so there were more influential people, I guess, that lived around me than were
Mhm.
teachers. And I think that they were bigger teachers for me.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Absolutely. So let me ask you a question.
Mhm.
Why was high school so difficult for you?
I hung out with, I grew up in the 80s, early 90s as a teenager. And
Mhm.
in Queens, there was a lot of stuff. There was a lot of graffiti. There was a lot of what they called gangs, but we were not gangs. We, it was not like what you hear about in gangs. It was more
Mhm.
like graffiti related. Um, I was younger than the people I hung out with. Most of them were already not in school. I was really trying to find my identity and my place. And it took me well into my 30s to realize that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be 50 this year. So
Wow.
yes. I know I'm not supposed to announce that as a lady, but I'm a little off the beaten path. And I'm very proud of it. I'm very, very proud of becoming me. Like I'm me finally. It took a long and I'm different incarnations of me. I
Mhm.
think I was searching for love. I was searching for like security in friendships. There's something to be said when there's people that have this closeness because they know each other so long.
Mhm.
When I moved to Florida in 2017, I think that's one of the things, not to mention I'm a workaholic, but that connection, you have to, it's easier when you're younger to make friends fast,
Mhm.
right? And then when you're older and you're more like, I want to talk about language and I want to talk about travel and the things that interest me now, it's harder to make long lasting friends because there's so many other things like your family and dinner time and that was what was not steady in my house. My mom was great, my grandmother's great, my father's great, all that stuff, but we didn't have that traditional dinner times at 6 o'clock. And, everybody, I was a latchkey kid. It's like, get up for school, leave for work, have fun, figure out if there's lunch in the house. You know what I mean? So it was, I wanted that connection. I wanted to feel part of something. And that's hard to do when you're starting over every 3 years. So by the time I got to high school, my mom tried to put me in an all-girls Catholic school for freshman year, from being in public school my entire life. And at that time, it was big hair, red lipstick, fast talking freshness. And they were not loving me. I mean, a lot of girls came from more wealthy people, go to these private schools too. And we had everything we needed, but we certainly weren't wealthy by any means. And my mom put me in that school because she knew I was going down a path that she didn't want me to travel. And I did everything in the world to get kicked out of that school. That's probably why I don't even really remember it, because I remember, and I wasn't bad in the sense that I was violent or I was goofy. So like, we were supposed to wear maroon socks. So I bought bright red socks. And then when the nuns would be like, why aren't you wearing the socks? They're not part of the uniform. I'm like, well, they're maroon wannabes. And then I'd get in trouble for mouthing off to the nuns. And then they call my mom. So it was a cycle like that. And they told my mom, they're like, we know she's trying to get kicked out. We know that she wants to leave this school. So we're not going to kick her out. We're just going to keep letting her get fresh. And she does well in class. When she shows up, she does well. She passed the tests. So it's not academically that she can't keep up. It's so apparent she doesn't want to be here. I can't tell you what I was running from. I can't tell you why I was angry. I can tell you the path that it took to release that anger and not look for those answers anymore, and to finally come into myself, and how important it is for me to be respectful for my children, for the things that they can't name, but to name it for them so that they recognize it's part of life. And you just have to focus on what you want, not what you don't want. And I think I spent a lot of time focusing on what I don't want, and I just got more of it.
So you're in Catholic school, all girls Catholic school, and there were times when you didn't show up for class. How's that possible?
You just don't go to the beginning. I didn't leave. I wasn't that bold. That wasn't until the next school, but I didn't come in and go. Yeah, if there was a way, I didn't know how to do it. I just wouldn't go. I tell my mom I was leaving for school. You had to take 2 buses to get to the school. She left for work before I even got up for school. And there were no cell phones back then. There was nothing. So if I was home to take the answering machine message to say that I wasn't in school, she never knew.
Yeah. What happened when she found out?
She never found out about the Catholic school, and it wasn't as much. She found out about the public school. So finally I got her to get me out. I'm not going anymore. So it was at that point, I'm not going to that school. It was the beginning of sophomore year? It was the beginning of junior. I made it through 2 years, just about, of the freshman and sophomore year. And then for junior year, I went to the zoned public school. And my mom, she didn't want me to go to any of the public schools because she thought they all looked like prisons. So that was her thing too. She's like, I don't want you to go to any of these schools. You're already hanging out with, a bunch of people that don't do the right thing. And it's just going to, breed it. And that school, I started cutting classes, because you could walk in and out of that school. There were doors that were open. It wasn't like, the private Catholic school has somebody at the front and somebody, there were ways to open and close the doors in the public school. But I think I made it only 3 weeks, and then I just stopped going. And again, she left for work before I left for school. So it wasn't, it wasn't hard. She got a postcard. That's how she found out like how long I hadn't gone to school. They were calling and I'd erased the messages on the machine, but they started sending postcards and it said how many days that I had missed school. And yeah, she lost it. She really did. But then it was like, well, I'm not going back. And at this point, they're going to fail me and they're going to leave me back. So I made it. That was my first big negotiation, actually, now that I think about it. I told her that if she signed me out of school, because I was turning 16 in November, and you can't sign out before you're 16. So this is still the beginning of the fall semester, right? Because it's the beginning of the year for November. And I said, on my birthday, if you sign me out of school, I will take my GED before the end of the year, and I will go to college for my first year, which would have been my senior year. So essentially, I'd be ahead of grade. And that's what convinced her to do it. So, and she signed me out, and I took my GED, and I did everything I said up until that I would go to college for that next year. I did 2 semesters. But I didn't go to that either. But I had to work. Like, she put her foot down and I had to get a job. I couldn't just be doing nothing. So I had to work. And then that was a really hard year for her. And I made it very difficult. And
the year you went to college, you made it difficult?
I made it difficult from when I was 13, at least. So, but
why do you think that is?
I didn't know who I was. I didn't know I was important. I didn't know. I guess I felt I wasn't as good as everybody else. And there's no reason for me to feel that way. My parents adored me. My parents were good to me. My parents were supportive. There were a lot of rules, but they come from that school. You know what I mean? My mother wasn't allowed after 7 p.m. her whole life. She married her first boyfriend. My uncle was in Vietnam. Like I'm everything you hear about middle class 80s, living beyond your means. You know, my mom never went out until she divorced my father. Like she never had a life outside. And here I am, like, going out, having friends. She didn't understand that. And I didn't understand where she came from. So I think a lot of it, and she was so young when she had us, like she was only 22. I didn't have my first son until I was 30. Like, she missed that whole decade and she dedicated it to us. I mean, it's applaudable in retrospect, but I didn't understand it at all. We essentially grew up together. And what I'm learning now, I don't know. I don't have any fact to this. My younger son is only 8 years old and he has dyslexia and ADHD. And it was really hard for me to think that's real. Like, I don't believe in medication. Medication like that is for addicts. That's breeding addicts. And I was so turned off to even learning about ADHD. I'm like, every kid has that. You're supposed to be wild and crazy and bounce off the walls. But now I know that there's so much more to it. And I see so much of how I was in my little guy, that there was definitely things that must have been neurological happening for me, that I spent all these years trying to do everything from self-medicating, putting myself in dangerous situations, trying to fit in without any triggers from my family. Do you know what I mean? So it's easier to help my youngest son thrive through these struggles for him by naming it. I think that was the big thing. I didn't attempt to name it. I couldn't name it. Nobody tried to name it. They just were like, she's just wild, but she has all this potential and she'll eventually make it out on the other side, which I did. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of work, and I made it, and I'm successful, and I'm happy. And I just wish I could have given it to myself 25 years ago.
So words are important to you.
Yes.
And yet you didn't want to label this.
No, I don't know that I didn't want to. I couldn't label it. I couldn't label it. I read so much and I wrote so much. I don't even have any of the books here. I used to write in those composition notebooks, like the wide ruled. I probably have 3 dozens of them. Just
Wow.
from when I was 13 to 25. Like I just had it with me and I rode the train everywhere. I would not get a driver's license. I just wanted to be on the train and I would just ride and write all the time. I believe that that saved me. I don't think I had to name it because I had an outlet and that was it.
Yeah,
And I,
good point.
yeah. Because I'm not like the friends that I grew up with. I wasn't then, and I knew I wasn't, and I didn't fit in because I wasn't the same. I always had inherently tools that I couldn't name back then. For instance, when things were at its wildest, I had a boyfriend that passed away. And I was 17, and it was an awful surprise for everybody. I was so in love with him, and I went to a really dark place for a very long time. But I knew there was more, and I would just write, and I would say, without knowing anything about affirmations, without knowing anything about training, reprogramming what you were thinking. When everyone else was at a party, listening to music or doing whatever they're doing, I would be sitting by the speaker going, I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to be a millionaire, just over and over. So I can see now why everybody thought I was crazy, but I would not say things that were like going the other path. I would just sit there in my darkest moment and just make something up that was so magical and so far from where I was. And I would just say it over and over and over again. And then I would write in the journal. And I didn't even know what I was doing, but I was saving myself.
What was it about being a millionaire that you wanted so badly?
Peace, freedom, not having to worry. Where's my rent coming from? Where's my food coming? You have to also think I was a 17-year-old living on my own. Yeah. So, I mean, I waited tables. I was a temp at RCA Records at the front desk, all wild and crazy. And then I was Gail Heyman's personal assistant in her hotel. And I was so wild looking. She'd be like, you have to go through the service entrance or you have to let me buy you 5 outfits because you cannot walk through the front door like that. So, but I knew I wanted more. I knew I deserved more. And it wasn't the money. And it's still not about the money for me now. It's about the peace and the freedom that nobody's going to have to worry. No one's going to have to worry to eat. No, my mom, my children, even my ex-husband, I love him. Like Kelly, if he goes belly up, he's got a room in my house. That's just that you can love freely, live joyfully, and not have to worry. Yeah. And I thought that meant being a millionaire. I know now differently, but at that point, that's what I thought it meant.
That's why I asked, because everybody ties it to something, right? And usually it's not actually a number. It's actually not the millionaire thing. It's just these things that I need, these things that would be really cool if that happened in my life. If my life got to a place where I had XYZ, right? So that's really cool. So so you go to college for a year. Then what happens?
I didn't show up. That's so I moved to, so that was 93 to 95. And I got an A in psychology. I did. I got an A in psychology because I talked my way into an A, and I was very impressed with myself for that. And I totally did. I didn't know I was a good salesperson back then either, but I totally was. I went and moved to Philadelphia. I wasn't doing anything good here. Like I said, I was temping and working with Gail. My friend at the time had the authorized tow company at JFK Airport. That got old really fast when people come in there screaming every day about their cars that got towed at the airport. At that time, I was too rough around the edges to be met with anger because I just got angry right back. And then I moved to Philly. I had an opportunity I used to go to a lot of raves. My friends were DJs, and I met some girls from Philadelphia. And they're like, let's rent a house together. And I was like, let's go. So I just moved to Philly. And I got my first real restaurant job there. I always worked like a little bit in restaurants, but never anything. And I realized the money was good. The money was fast. You can work, and you're working. If you pick the right restaurant, you're at a party every day. It's perfect, right? So I had a really good time in Philly, and I started getting out of my own head. Then I got an opportunity to take a ride to Vegas. And so I got in a car and I left Philly and I went to Vegas, and I lived there. We did the old Route 66 thing. We took 3 months to drive out there. I think we rented Liberace's old house before they knocked it down when they made the airport too big. And I got to wait. Waiting tables got me very far. And that turns into one of my favorite things to write about. People. Every person has a story, just like you. Oh my God, I didn't even think about that. So I would make up stories or the conversations I had with people. And those are the people I remember. There was this lady who lived in Society Hill in Philly, which is, Center City, very wealthy. And I worked in the 4th Street Diner, which is basically the equivalent of Katz, like with the big pastrami sandwiches and everything. And this lady would come in for lunch for a matzo ball soup in couture evening gowns with makeup all over her face. And the guy behind the counter was always so mean to her. But you could tell she obviously was mentally somewhere. And she lived in Society Hill and she had couture dresses. So there's a huge story there. And she loved your matzo ball soup. Why would you be mean to this lady? Like, why doesn't anyone talk to her to try to get a little bit about her story? Because she probably has the greatest stories. And I would try to talk to her, but she just wanted that matzo ball soup. So I'd get little bits. And she would tell me about where she would get perfumes or she was traveling. I never got her full story, but every time she would tell me about one of her travels to get a perfume, I'd write it down. She would tell me about her dresses, how she got the dresses. And some of them were more tattered than the other. And I remember her so clearly because I felt like she looked how I felt. And
how did she look?
She looked disheveled and messy and classy at the same time, and misunderstood, and a wealth of knowledge and experience that nobody was even curious about. And I was so curious, and she was so unwilling to share that because people were so mean to her. And I think if she was in a different, and she was stuck in her environment, she was a product of her routine and her environment, and whatever care that she was given wasn't care enough, right? So like, I think that was not the first lesson, but a really good lesson in that, what you said before, that money isn't it. Money doesn't do it, because this lady had all the money in the world at her fingertips. Meanwhile, there was nobody even like careful enough to say, maybe let's fix your makeup before you leave. You know what I mean? Or let me walk you down. Why is she walking around Philadelphia in a couture dress and makeup all over her face by herself? Like why? Lonely. I think that lonely is another word that I felt that she was. And her eyes weren't empty. Her eyes really held her story. And I think she became so closed off from how she was treated that she didn't want to tell her story anymore. Maybe that's what caused the mental illness. See, I made up this whole story about her in my own head, and I loved her so much. And there were so many people that I met along the way. And I'll always say that my years in the restaurants and the places that I worked and the people I met were the biggest teachers in my life. the biggest. There was a bookie that would come in, this guy with these big glasses. He looked like he jumped right out of Donnie Brasco, and he knew, like, he would come in and he would pretend like he wasn't a bookie, but I mean, he would sit there with the betting sheets, and he would, guys would come in and sit with him, and he paid attention to me. He would always ask me about me. Why are you here? What are you gonna do? Why are you just doing this? And it was always curious to me on that level, like, why are the guys that aren't doing anything good are the ones that are curious about where I'm going? Like, that's but he would always be like, you're better than this. You're better than this. So it would always be a reminder from even my friends back when I was a teenager. I didn't fit in because they knew I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't a drug addict, and I didn't want that. Like, I always didn't understand. I still don't understand what is so bad to escape from, that's the only choice for some people. And when I had a lot of friends that were deep in the perils of addiction, they would say to me, Melissa, you're not like us. Like, this wasn't a choice for you because you have a joy in your heart that we don't know. And it was so hard for me to understand. And I understand it now, but that was really hard to understand.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Why is it that why you mentioned something a minute ago about these people that weren't necessarily doing good things were always interested in what you were up to? Why do you think that is?
Because I gave them hope. That's what I think now. I thought that back then, I thought that they just thought I wasn't good enough to hang out with them. But I think I gave them hope that they could be different. But it comes down to choices, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't realize that when you're 16.
How old were you when you were in Philly?
18, 19. 8. I was in Vegas by the time I was 20.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in Philly. It was probably 18, 96, 97. I went. And then I was in Vegas by 98. And then I was back in the city by the millennial, by 2000. I was working downtown by then. Those 10 years, my 20s were just incredible. Like, there's a lot of, so I was the manager and a bartender and a waitress, and I was all things of the Comedy Cellar in downtown Manhattan, which is when I really made the change to kind of change the people in my life. And go ahead.
It's okay. Did you choose that comedy club, or did they choose you?
They chose me. This is my mom. I wanted to come home from Vegas. And my mom, I had nowhere to go, right? Because I gave up my apartment. And of course, my grandmother, my mother hates me because I left again and I'm doing nothing good. And I called my grandmother and I was like, Mom, I called her mom. I was like, get me a plane ticket. Will you get me a plane ticket so I can come home? Can I come stay with you? She's like, you can't come. Melissa, I'd never close the door on you, but if I let you stay here for free, your mother will have a heart attack. You can't do that to me. You need to call your mother. And I'll buy you a plane ticket if she lets you go live there. And I was like, all right, I'll call her. I'll see what she says. And I begged my mom, please let me come home, please. And Mama will buy me the plane ticket. Oh, I don't even think I told her that first. I think I'm sure I said something like, I have money for a plane ticket because I wasn't getting my grandmother in trouble. I 100% wouldn't have said that. She knows now, but that conversation, I definitely would have said that. And she said, and my brother was in college in West Virginia at the time. So there was an empty PS, back up a second. When I left when I was 17, she went and got a 2-bedroom apartment, so I couldn't move back in. So it was just her and my brother. So she was like, I'm not doing this with you anymore. And you're not taking your brother down the path you're on. She moved to another neighborhood to send him to another Catholic school in a different neighborhood so he wouldn't make friends with any of my friends. And And I don't know what I said to her, but she agreed to let me come home. But I only had 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks to get a job. I had 2 weeks to not hang out with crazy people. And if I didn't get it together, I'm out and I'd have to figure it out. So of course I came home and I did nothing for 13 days. And on day 14, she's like, you gotta leave tomorrow. Like, you've had your 2 weeks. You've been out every single night. You've been doing whatever you're doing, which I don't remember though, but I'm sure I wasn't doing it because I do remember on day 14, I've printed up 50 resumes. And at the time, there was the Village Voice was really it to find restaurant jobs. And you just walked around to the restaurants that you wanted, handing out resumes. And I was out the entire day, and it was the last one in my hands. And I walked into the Comedy Cell and nobody even offered me an interview. Nobody, a couple of people talked to me on the spot, like, well, we might be hiring. There was no leads. There was nothing positive. And I had to get on the train and go home and figure out where I was going to live. And I walked into the Comedy Cell, is the basement, and upstairs is the Olive Street Cafe. So it's a restaurant upstairs and the club is downstairs. And it was just, if for those of you who don't know the Comedy Cell and the Olive Street Cafe, it's on McDougal Street in the West Village. It's this beautiful old building on McDougal Street, which is iconic in the West Village. You got Cafe Wa to the left, Cafe Reggio to the right, Mamoon's in the middle, people all over the place. I've lived in every neighborhood in all of Queens, so every 3 step I see somebody that I know. And I walked in there, I go to the back, Charlie Chaplin's playing, there's chalkboards all over the table, place is a mess, everyone's screaming. I think it was a Sunday afternoon because there were so many people in there, it was daytime. And I asked for the manager, and the bartender said, good luck, she's over there. And I was like, oh no. And then I see this lady, like, just a mess at the table, and her face is like this, and she's miserable. And I walk over and I'm like, you need to hire me. I cannot go home without a job or I'm going to be homeless. And she looked at my resume and she looked at me and she's like, do you do anything? And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, do you go to school? Do you want to be an actress? Are you a model? Like, what's your thing?
Do you have a life?
Yeah. And I was like, no, I have a mom that's going to kick me out if I don't have a job.
I'm literally up against the wall here. Yeah, right.
And she's like, you cannot ask for a day off. You can only call in dead. And I'm going to give you every shitty shift I have to fill. And I was like, fine. She's like, come in tomorrow at 10 a.m. And I was like, oh my God, thank God. And I went home with the job and I stayed there for almost 10 years.
Now, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, I want you to answer a question about why it is that you think she hired you. We'll be right back. Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com, and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go there today. We're back with Melissa Horne, and we're talking about her job at the Comedy Cellar. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right. So I want to ask you about Vegas in a second, but you were in Philly. So you went from Queens to Philly. You were in Philly. Somebody offered to have you drive with them for 3 months, Route 66 to Vegas. You end up calling your grandmother, who tells you that she'll buy you a plane ticket, but you got to call your mom. Is this your mother's mother?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So she's going to be in trouble with your mom, and she knew it, right? Mm-hmm. So she tells you that she'll buy you a plane ticket, but you got to call your mom and basically mend fences and get your mom to agree to let you come back, right? Your mom moved to a 2-bedroom apartment so that you didn't have a place to come to, which is sort of her tough love thing, right? Moves your brother to another neighborhood, and sends him to another Catholic school that's different from where you are, right? I mean, this is amazing. So you go back, you hang out for 13 days, you party, do your thing, you take 50 resumes, you go down and start walking into places. And by the way, one of the things that we talk about a lot on this podcast is how important it is to show up. Like Dale Carnegie once said, 85% of success is just showing up. I believe it's 100%. And I'll tell you why in a minute, but I believe it's 100%. Anyway, so you walk in and this lady has this basic look on her face like, don't bother me, don't talk to me, I don't want to have anything to do with you, okay? She's sort of the epitome of tough love. And she tells you that, and you walk up to her and say, look, I'm literally desperate. I have to have a job. You have to hire me, right? And she says, all you're going to be able to do is call in dead. I'm going to give you every terrible thing there is to do, and everything's a test, right? And you ended up there for 10 years?
Almost, yeah.
Okay, so here's the question, $64,000 question. Why do you think she hired you?
Because she knew I was going to show up. She knew exactly.
You were more motivated than any other candidate on the planet, right? That she had seen, because everybody else was kind of like, hey, if you've got a position, I'd like to tend bar. Hey, if you got a position, I'd like to work the door. Hey, if you got a position, you with me? Right?
Yeah.
That wasn't the thing. The thing with you was and I'll bet you dollars to donuts, if you'd ever asked her, she would have told you that she had a situation like that years ago and somebody gave her an opportunity, right? Which is sort of why she had that look on her face, right?
Yeah.
Tell me I'm wrong, right?
So, no, you're 100% right.
So you're in Philly and you're like 18 years old and somebody says, hey, let's take Route 66 for 3 months and go to Vegas. What? What?
Yeah, I just went. So, because I was
What made you do that, and who was it?
It was my girlfriend, Stacy, who I'm still friends with now. She had a friend that lived in Vegas named Anne Marie, who was an event planner, and they needed bartenders for a big convention that was coming up for Halloween.
There you go. Had Thelma and Louise come out yet?
Yes, it had already come out. I was done living with the girls in Philly. Yeah. They were a little more wild than like I said, I partied, but I was not over the edge. Like, I didn't want to die. Okay. That was not on the agenda.
Right.
And it was too far. It wasn't my thing anymore.
This was after the boyfriend had passed, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, I always wanted more. I just didn't know what that more was. And I wasn't okay with that.
When you look back on that 3 months, what was the number one thing that you learned, and what was your favorite thing
on the road trip? I learned, oh my God, so much. My biggest thing before we left was I want to hang out on the Mississippi River where that's something we can find from Huck Finn. I wanted to see the Mississippi River. That was before I left. One of the things that, because we made a map. We bought an atlas map with the highlight of everywhere we went. We had to do this trip on maps. Like, there was no phones yet. So my thing was, I wanted to see the Mississippi River, and I wanted to stay off the interstate as much as we could. I think the coolest thing I saw was this place called Lucille's, which was an old gas station with this old lady sitting in her kitchen with a boob tube TV on it, with a book like this thick of people that passed through her spot to sign where they were from. And the gas station wasn't even there anymore. Cadillac Ranch was really cool. It's not a big ranch. It's just a bunch of Cadillacs stuck in the ground.
Buried in the ground. Yeah. I've seen it,
yeah. So Bruno was me and Stacy's dog. Before I left for Philly, I lived with Stacy. That's how we knew each other. And I came home. I did the same thing to Stacy that I did to my mom. Stacy was 5 years older than me. And Stacy would get me jobs when I wouldn't have a job. That's also the girl that got the tow company in JFK. So I came home with this little puppy that was like 5 weeks old. I'm like, can we keep him? And she's like, well, he's mine. If I'm going to pay for him, then he's mine. And you really don't have rights to Bruno. So of course I'm like, all right, well, I don't have money to pay for Bruno. So that's fair. I get to play with him and you get to be mom and that's it. So when we were going, it was Stacy, me, and a 1989 Toyota Celica with a now 100-pound bull mastiff puppy that I had her keep. And he came with us. So when we started driving, our first stop was Ohio. And we had to figure out where we're putting this 100-pound dog at every stop along the way. So in Chicago, there was no Motel 6, like you could only get in a high rise. So we got him puppy Valiums from the vet to try to keep him calm for when he couldn't see us. Well, we went out in Chicago because it was Chicago, and we came back to the hotel with like a pirate knife in the door that said, shut your dog up or don't stay in these hotels anymore. And I was like, we cannot go out for the rest of the trip unless it's during the day and we could take Bruno with us.
So Bruno barked the whole time?
He barked he must have. I mean, that's what the pirate note said. Because when we left, we thought that he was goofy enough from the puppy Valium that he would be quiet, but he was not. We were traveling around the time there was so many cool things about that trip. We and Stacy didn't kill each other. We were looking for Halloween costumes the whole trip because we had to be dressed up for this event that we had the job that we were going to.
But you were working, yeah.
Yeah. So I decided I was going to be a dark fairy, and Stacy, I forgot what Stacy was going to be because Stacy's tall and beautiful and she could fit into any outfit. I'm short and thick. There's very few outfits that fit me the way that they're supposed to fit. So we stopped at every thrift store, I think, between Chicago and Vegas to find me my secondhand fairy outfit. We finally found a white one that we had to dye in a bathtub in one of the hotels that we turned the entire bathtub black, which turned out to be the outfit. We found my Huck Finn spot on the Mississippi, and I read Huck Finn again on the trip. And we found a piece of wood that was, I don't know what it's called when the wood gets all rounded from being in the water.
Driftwood?
Like a driftwood, but it was totally like how it gets smoothed around the edges from the water. And it was shaped like a cowboy boot with a spur. We couldn't fit it in the car, but we took like 90 pictures of it. I have a picture of it somewhere. And I thought, how magical that we found a cowboy boot with the spur on this driftwood piece on the, muddiest part where we were on the Mississippi. It was half clear and half muddy. I don't know why that happens, but that's the part of the river that we found where we found this boot that we couldn't fit in the car. There was so many cool things about that trip, and really learning the country, that like the people that we would meet and what they came with. That was the first time I knew that I realized that how I felt about New York, people felt about where they were from. They were proud. That was part of their identity. I couldn't name it. Like, I'm New York through and through, but I couldn't name what that loyalty and closeness I felt to where I was from. And that's why I always ran back there. You hear it all the time. I'm sure you especially hear it all the time. People are afraid of New York to go to make money. I was not. I was afraid to make money and live anywhere, Philly, Vegas. I ran back to New York, but I was not afraid of New York feeding me. I was afraid of eating outside of New York. Don't know why. Florida, this move to Florida was the first time I feel comfortable and safe. And obviously I've made this wonderfully successful business now that I don't want to go back. I do not have a desire, I miss it. I go home every year and I go like a tourist now. I go see shows, I go ice skating, I go see all the things that I couldn't do when I was younger.
Did we say what you learned on the trip?
People, me. I think, I don't know. That's what I learned. I learned that people are awesome and have stuff to teach you all over the place.
They're some of the
And
coolest people on the planet in this country. Seriously.
yes,
And if you
yes,
just stay curious about them, right? And
yeah.
have a conversation, they want to tell you their story. There's a lot of people out there that are almost desperate to tell you their story if you just ask, just care enough to ask, you know?
And listen.
Yeah.
And I wanted to travel. That's what I learned. I learned that I did not, I do not want to be the way that what I was doing in New York was traveling with a token,
Right.
What I learned was I want to see this world. That's what I learned.
You never
Yeah.
really sat still when you were in New York. That seems to be the theme anyway. It's
No.
like, it seems like you're not really all that excited about sitting still even today.
No,
So-
I'm all over the place.
Yeah,
I have ADHD.
That's
I'm
the
sorry.
impression I get anyway. So,
I'm
so
sorry.
no. So how long were you in Vegas?
A year.
Okay. And what was it that made you call your grandmother and say, "Hey, I have to come home"?
Me and Stacy were going to kill each other.
Oh,
That was.
Vegas wasn't big enough.
It wasn't. Well, we had a really big house with this gorgeous pool in the background, like in the backyard. Bruno was never the same after that trip. And I worked at Planet Hollywood. The car that we drove in when we got there died. The wheels melted into the driveway after how long it took for us to put the money together to fix it. I took public transportation to the Strip, which I didn't mind because I would meet the coolest people. I would find the locals that would take me like to the depths of Vegas on the bus, and it was fun. I had a lot of fun. But Stacy was, she was working for her friend. She wanted to go. I don't know what she wanted. We were just done with each other because we were the only two that we could talk to. There weren't really cell phones. We were both working to the bone. We were making it happen, but it wasn't fun for me anymore. And she had a different path she wanted to go. Stacy and my relationship, we love each other so much, and we truly are very good friends, but she always wanted to take care of me. And I always let her make the decisions of what she thought was best for me. But I think I learned the beginning of my voice on that trip. And I wasn't going to let my mother run my life. And I certainly was not going to let you run my life.
Right.
So I'm not answering to you where I'm going. I'm not answering to you when I'm not coming home. I already left my mother for those reasons. So I'm certainly not going to do it now. And when it started getting to that, and it was becoming hard for her to hear no from me, it was time for me to go.
Yeah.
And that was it.
I got you. So you go back to New York, you go to work in the Comedy Cellar, and you worked there for 10 years?
Nearly. Yep, just about.
So what made you stay that long?
It was 6 years.
Okay.
Because
what made you stay that long? Because you're kind of one of those people that has kind of this wanderlust thing going on, and all of a sudden you land and you're there for 6 years. How long did you stay with your mom?
She moved out of her own apartment. I kept the apartment.
She left you there?
She left me there. She decided that we can't. Yeah, it was probably about 6 months before she's like, you know what? I don't even want to be here anymore. And I certainly don't want to live with you. And your brother's not coming home. So do you want to take over the lease? And I was like, yep, see you later. And I got a roommate and I took over the lease. I mean, it was a pre-war Queens building on rent control. Like I couldn't have gotten that deal anywhere else.
So what was the single most important thing you learned in 6 years with the Comedy Cellar?
There's so much, but I'll tell you what I hold dear to my heart. Well, you know what? That was my home. That's why it gave me the sense of home that I never knew. That's number one. That's the first place I go every time I go back to New York. That's my home.
Why?
Why? Because I learned that I showed up all the time, and what it got me, I made great money for that time in my life. It created stability for me.
You belonged.
I belonged in this dysfunctional way. So we were like this pod of the potential people. There were different people. There was only 2 people that ever worked in that building that were from New York. And I was one of them. My friends were from China and Israel and Iceland and upstate New York, and they all had something. So I understand the lady that hired me name was Sylvia, and she wasn't there the entire time I was there, and nobody else. It was serendipitous that I walked in and she was the manager and she hired me. And you must be 100% like she was giving it back from someplace that she came from, because she wasn't there much long. She was there for decades and wasn't there much longer after I was hired. But then I learned the dynamics of everything that was going on in there. And I never called in sick. I took every shift. I learned the ropes after that. So I knew how to get the best shifts. And that's it. It was an eye for detail, paying attention and doing your job, which were all things I could do. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed this was anyone that came up from anywhere, like Raymond. I never watched TV. That was another thing. Like I was more into books. I wasn't into TV, but I didn't know who anybody was. Jerry Seinfeld was on stage all the time. Chris Rock. What's the guy's name? Raymond, the Everybody Love Raymond guy. Kevin Hart wasn't famous when I started there. Dave Chappelle wasn't totally famous when I started there. So a lot of these guys got famous with us. You know what I mean?
Cool.
Then there was David Lee Roth's father. I didn't even know this. Owned Cafe Wa before my owner owned Cafe Wa. The guy who owned the Comedy Cellar owned Cafe Wa too at the time I was working there. But David Lee Roth would come at Christmas time because it was nostalgic for him of his father, and he didn't want to hang out with famous people. He wanted to hang out with us wait staff because we didn't give a crap. And we just would have fun. I took from Sylvia Call In Dead very serious. So if I was out all night, I knew I was going to lose my job if I didn't show up the next day for the next shift. So I did. I showed up.
You buckled down.
Yeah, there was that. It meant so much to me that it taught me how to show up. So that was the biggest lesson, that I was in control of my money. So if I didn't get the shifts that I needed, and I needed to work a double to get that shift, that I needed to work as little or as much as I wanted or could to live the lifestyle I wanted. It taught me that. It taught me the biggest lesson I took from there, because underneath it all, love and people are what's most important to me. The owner of the Comedy Cellar was an Israeli man named Menachem Dorman. His entire kitchen and his entire support staff was Palestinian. And we were open until 5 o'clock in the morning in the West Village of New York City. And that is when the greatest debates I've ever heard in my life happened at table 21 in the back of that restaurant, because comedians are the smartest bunch of sociopaths in the world. The owner was dangerously smart. The people that worked in his kitchen from Palestine were attorneys, head of armies. These were people that came to America for everything that people come to America for. And they would debate hundreds of century-year-old war in the Middle East. And that's where I learned history from. And I also learned how much they loved each other and respected their opinions from what we see on the news, and what I learned in that restaurant are very different. And they would come in with books to support their stance. And I learned culture about Ramadan, and I learned culture about Kentucky from the kid that came from Kentucky that wanted to go to NYU to the Tisch School. I learned more in those years, and I was addicted to learning from everything, from books to character to drive. These comedians, like pilot season is in the spring and in like Colorado when they're
Mhm.
picking what they're going to do, what sitcoms, what writers, what actors. And for these guys, some of them were so funny and so clever. And there are more attorneys turning comedians that why would you pay for school for that long to be an attorney, to give it up and be a comedian and make $20 a night in downtown Manhattan to maybe get a sitcom? That drive, until you see it, you can't unless you already have it. I realized that there was so much more I can do from watching people that were no different than me do it.
We've interviewed a lot of people that have gone to law school and didn't become lawyers. And the drive was what got them there, right? There was somebody, something that influenced them, that like their family always told them they needed to be an attorney, whatever the situation was. And they did it and they finished. And then they went to work in a law firm and realized that just wasn't for them, right? But they still brought that same intensity, that same drive, that same thing that just lights their candle, right? So can I ask you a question?
Mhm.
What made you leave the Comedy Cellar?
I got offered a job at another comedy club, and it was heartbreaking for me, but they offered me a management position. Like I was 29 at
Mhm.
that point, right? So my entire 20s was really Vegas Comedy Cellar. I tried all different things while I was there, right? Because now I was a makeup artist. I was able to train with Toby Britton, the guy Tom Supranant, who did the Grinch makeup. And I thought I wanted to be a makeup artist. And then I didn't want to move to LA. And that's where the, special effects makeup is. And I didn't want to do models in New York. And I got to, do stuff with Saturday Night Live. There was all this cool stuff I had an opportunity to do. Then I wanted to be a talent manager because I would help the guys work out their sets, and I would go to Just for Laughs in Montreal and see what the pilot season was like and how they pick talent. And then again, you have to go to LA once you get out of this certain place. You had to go to, even the talent did, right? That I wasn't willing to go to LA. And then one of the guys that I was doing submissions for, an agent, knew that they were opening up a new comedy club. And he said, I think you should talk to the owner because he needs somebody like you to run the place and get it on its feet. And I was like, nah, I can never leave here. Like, this is my home. And the guy came to the Comedy Cellar to interview me because I refused to go meet him.
Mhm.
And I was like, dude, you got to leave because I'm going to get fired. But he's like, you need to come meet with me. I wanted to see how you work to make sure that Marty was right. And he gave me an offer that was not anything I expected. And I went to the managers of the Comedy Cellar and I asked them to match it. And they said that they couldn't. And I told them that I would give them a month, 2 months, whatever time they needed to train somebody for the positions that I was doing and to fill my schedule. And they got so angry with me that they told me to leave the building right then. And I wasn't allowed back in the building for almost a year.
Wow.
Mhm.
So you go to work for this other comedy place, right? Comedy club. How long are you there?
Only a couple years. One of the things that they offered me was health insurance.
Mhm.
And I hadn't been to the doctor probably in a decade at that point, unless I was dying, which I'm a vitamin taker. I don't go to the doctor unless I'm dying. And I got pregnant, probably, I'm going to say within the first 7 months of being there.
Mm.
Like it was so soon. It was before the insurance even fully kicked in. And then I stayed there. So it was less than 2 years because I worked until the day before I had Nick there. And then I moved out to my dad's for a little while, and I would drive from Long Island. I would drive from Long Island, the furthest East Hampton, Long Island, to Manhattan to pick up this weekend shifts from when Nick was 3 weeks old. And then I moved to Staten Island with Stacy when Nick was 6 weeks old. And then when he was a year, I couldn't take the work. I wasn't sleeping at all because I was working at night with the baby during the day. That I went back to college and then I went and applied to schools, and I wound up working just the weekends. Went to school with a daycare that was only $2 an hour, so I can go to school. And I started applying for scholarships. And when Nick was born, after that first year in school, I was making enough money in scholarships to only have to work on the weekend till I figured out what I was going to do.
Wow.
Mhm.
So you go back to school at CUNY, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
What was your major?
I was an English and business double major
Why?
because I wanted to originally, when I went, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I loved to write and I knew I loved to read.
Mhm.
So I figured English was just natural. I didn't know anything about how you structure academics, like how you pick a major or anything like that. And I knew business was something I kind of already knew. I was already doing marketing. I was running the restaurant. So I guess to learn the theory behind it. And I didn't know which way I wanted to go, but I could pick the classes I liked better with those majors if they were in place. And I thought that I wanted to open a bookstore because now I'm living in Staten Island, right? I thought that I wanted to open a used bookstore cafe where people can come and share ideas and the kids could read. I didn't know how isolating it was to be a single mom. I never changed a diaper before Nick was born when I was nearly 30 years old. I had no idea. Like I could hardly feed myself. Now I was in charge of feeding another human being, right? I had to learn how to make better choices. All this time I was learning to make better choices, but I had to learn to make better choices, like future choices, not like tomorrow choices, and I couldn't be an effective mom and think I could work in nightclubs and everything that's made me everything I've been up to that point. So I thought I was going to open a bookstore in Staten Island. That was like an idea building place, not just a bookstore, but like what I couldn't name then, I could name now. Basically like an investor spot, like people to come and pitch ideas and people to put money together to make these ideas happen, but it be in the backdrop of a bookstore.
Okay.
And then I turned into, I'm going to go to law school. I want to do criminal defense for juveniles. And because I wanted to save my friends that I couldn't save. And oh my God, that almost made me cry. So I started getting involved in the Office of Family and Children's Services in New York. I volunteered with my son Nick through the college. I volunteered to mentor girls that were out of control, because what I was learning, the magic about an adult going back to college and not doing it traditional, is that every time you're in one of these classes, and it's also part of divine intervention, it's something you can apply directly into your life. As a child or a young adult. Oftentimes, even in my non-traditional, both young adult and adult, there wouldn't have been an opportunity to apply what I'm learning in the classes of management theory or of creative writing, nonfiction journalism. Like, you're not going to be as objective if you're not reading those things that affect your life and you're learning it just to learn. So that's what was happening. Every time, I have to backtrack. I didn't know I was book smart. I always knew I was smart, but I always identified myself as being street smart, being able to spot a trouble, being able to know I want to stay away from that guy. I want to get closer to that person. And I don't mean like man, but like person. Like, this person is going to lead me in the right direction. If I want to get in trouble, that's the guy I want to hang out with. Like, I knew exactly which way would suit what I needed for me at that time.
Mhm.
When I went to college, they made me sing and dance. I had my GED. I got a high enough score to get into a 4-year college. It was 10 years earlier, right? That was 1992. Now we're in 2006. So, and I forgot when I was registering, those 2 years I did as the deal to my mom that I didn't show up on. I didn't know that they are going to follow those transcripts. I thought they just wanted my GED. So when I'm trying to figure out what years I went to that school, because they couldn't even figure it out, and it was still under the CUNY umbrella, turns out I had a 0.25 GPA, which ruins my whole high score on the GED to get in that school. They didn't want to let me in. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm 30 years old now. I was 16 when I did that. I had no idea that it was going to affect me now. What can I really had to beg for them to let me in this school. And they said they would put me on academic probation. I really only had to do like one remedial math, like the placement test I passed. It was like some stupid remedial math I had to do. I was like, all right, well, whatever. Who knows this? Nobody uses that math anyway, but fine, I'll sit through it. I had to sing and dance. And I was like, they asked me, why should we even give you a chance? I'm like, because I'm a 30-year-old single mother now and I'm paying for this myself. So nobody's helping me. No, I'm here because I want a better life for me and my son, not because I made a deal with my mom when I was 16 about I don't go to school anymore. And they let me in. And one of the classes you have to take in that first year is a core like history class, like a social studies class. And the teacher I got, now most of the teachers in the City University of New York are my age at that time. Like I'm more the same age as the professors as I am the students. And this woman taught at Columbia and she was teaching adjunct in my school. And she tore up this class from the first one. She's like, I'm telling you, I don't give out A's. And there's one project that will get you an A in my class. And you guys, she was a woman of color and she was my age and she was very into your civil rights movement and the amendments of our Constitution. So she said that everyone in the class would have to find somebody that they identify with from the civil rights movement, knowing that it's a predominantly white, Italian, or Irish area where the school is located. And you're going to have to find that person, interview them, and then submit the interview to get an A in my class, because you will never get an A on any of my tests, ever. And they're going to be hard. And the only way when you fail every single one of my tests that I'm even going to pass you is if you find this person and make the interview. And I was like, come on, right? This is my first time back in school. I don't know anything about the civil rights movement. My dad, they made fun of him because he was a draft agent, went to Canada, hang out with cows, and then came back and all this, this is not what I signed up for. And I'm like, how am I even going to find this? And she wasn't given any clues. She was like, there are these groups that were for SDS and, there are people like you. This was her lesson. There are people like you. There are people like anybody that they can identify with that were somehow involved in the civil rights movement. Well, I found Brian Flannery in a bar on 104th Street that was part of the Weatherman Underground. And he did Thursday night's trivia outside of Columbia University. And I walked in there and I said, I know you're Brian Flanagan, and I need an A in this class because I just returned to school and they have me on probation and I got this lady who's going to give me an F and I cannot get kicked out of school. So we are going to do an interview so I can get an A. And he's like, are you the FBI? He thought I was the FBI. I was like, I could give a shit about the FBI. I'm not the FBI. I don't care what you did. I know that there was a townhome. I know there was Patty Hearst. I know there was a bomb. And I know you had something to do with it. And I want to know why. That's so I can stand this in. And he's like, he finally realized that I was not the FBI. And he gave me an interview. And I got an A in that class. And she said to me, how did you find this guy? And can you take me to meet him? Because nobody's ever done this assignment and you did it. And I went and had my birthday party at his bar and I brought her there to meet him.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So you graduate from CUNY with a bachelor's in English and and business.
No, so I couldn't do another year. I was just overwhelmed. So I took the BA in English and I took a minor in business marketing so that because I needed another like 18 credits and I was just done. I
Yeah.
couldn't do, I had won the Bell Zeller scholarship, which would allow me to still get a full ride and do the other year, but I wasn't getting the score I wanted on an LSAT for a full scholarship into law school. I had also moved to Philly. My dad passed away in the middle of this. And I bought a house in Philadelphia and I was driving from Philly to Staten Island for my classes with my then 3-year-old son who also got sick. Anything that could happen in the middle of my 5 year, it took 5 years to get this. My son got sick after he was born and we were in a hospital for 2.5 months for surgeries that he needed. So I was living in the hospital, but I couldn't not go to school because I'd lose my scholarship. Right after we came out of the hospital, my dad went in for a routine valve thing on his heart and he didn't make it off the table. So that was 10 days after I came out of the hospital with Nick.
Gosh.
And just that I continued going to school to not lose the scholarship was probably the greatest thing, except for that. You see that picture behind me right there? I graduated valedictorian. So
you started with 0.25 as a grade point average and you graduated valedictorian.
3.98.
Not bad, huh?
No.
What did that teach you?
It taught me that I was book smart. It taught me that I was always smart. That I just didn't, it taught me to believe in myself. Yeah.
That's cool. So you graduate. Where do you go?
Philly. I was still in Philly. I was still going to try to go to law school, but then the big L word snuck up on me and I fell in love. And then I bought a dumpster company and moved back to New York. Yeah.
So you go back to New York.
Yeah.
How long are you there?
So that was 2012. Graduated 2011. I'm back in New York by 2012. I rented the house in Philly. And then
The one you owned, yeah.
And then I eventually sold it not too long after that because the love thing didn't work out the way it intended. So now I'm dead broke again. No law school, graduated valedictorian, everybody's biggest disappointment. I think that's my perception. I know now it only took a very little while to get out of my head this time. So I went and got my real estate license. First, I decided to sell recap truck tires, kind of as a stick in the eye to the love that didn't last, because he would only be able to buy tires through me to run his trucks from the business that he stole from me. But but then I was like, I really don't like the tires and I really don't care enough to make him have to buy tires through me. So I went and got my real estate license and I became a very successful real estate agent. And that only took a few months.
Hold on. You graduated law school?
No, I never went to law school.
Oh, you never went to law school. So the valedictorian thing was undergrad.
Yep.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're clear. So then you go get your real estate. So what is a recapped truck tire?
So tires have treads around them, and there are companies and factories throughout the United States that and tires are very expensive. So it costs about 50% less to have the tires rebuilt on the old tire and put them back in the trucks. Now they're regulated by the DOT and stuff like that. So you can get bald truck tires when they have to trade them in, have them recapped and then resell them as new, or you can ship containers of the bald tires to other countries and have them recapped there because they don't have the same DOT regulations.
Wow. That sounds kind of dangerous.
Yeah, it was definitely nothing. I don't need to know that much about trucks or garbage.
Right.
That
No kidding.
right out of
No kidding. Why real estate?
Because I thought with what I wanted to do with law, because that changed a couple of times too. I wanted to do juvenile justice defense for juveniles. I also wanted to do wealth management and wealth planning. So I thought that with my real estate license, without a law degree, I can still do wealth management and wealth planning and give back voluntarily to juvenile justice.
Mhm.
So that's what it is.
So
So what do I do now? So now I'm in
you get
Florida.
started in real estate.
I get started in real
You
estate.
sold 13 houses in 13 weeks.
Oh, that was here. That was in Florida.
Okay.
So when I get
So you get
started,
started in real estate. What was it like getting started in real estate? Was it in New York?
yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What was
So
that
it
like?
it
Because
was a
that's
big
quite
fat
that's quite a
nothing.
market.
It was, I sold this much, a big fat zero for my first year in real
A big
estate.
goose egg.
I thought
Wouldn't make
that,
you different than a lot of people.
no, I thought that from my connections from when we had the dumpsters with the contractors we worked with the demo, that they would naturally hire me because now I'm a real estate agent. They already know me. And it was like, no, you're the dumpster girl. You're not the real estate girl.
Mhm.
So that was a hard, like, whoosh, what do you mean? Oh my God. And then they were right, because what do I do? Like,
Mhm.
I don't know what to do.
So it really is what you know.
So yeah. So I found, this guy found me actually, because I had people knew me in trucking and in construction. I would get calls to bid on jobs and things like that. And a lot of people didn't know that me and my ex had split. And we both, I'll say this, and he's now my best friend, so I'm over the whole thing. But we both were integral parts in making that business successful in what we knew about construction and trucking, how we made it, marketing, sales, all those things that weren't refined yet. It was really a great lesson to figure out that we were good at those things and how it translated across multiple industries. So I met this guy at a table trying to bid a woman-owned business construction company. And he's like, oh, I'm a real estate agent. I'm like, oh, so am I. And he's like, oh, so what have you sold? And I'm like, nothing yet. And he was like, well, what do how are you getting business? And I whipped out my little computer and I was like, well, I made this CRM and I made this website and I did all these beautiful flyers. And he's like, how many contracts have you signed? And I'm like, none. And he's like, well, 0% of zero is still zero, right? And I was like, yeah, well, don't worry. I'm going to get these people and I'm going to sell all these houses. And he's like, why don't you come work for me? And I was like, why would I work for you? I get this great split at this company. And he's like, how many contracts have you signed? And I was like, zero. He's like, 0% of zero is still zero. So we went around like that for 6 months. And finally, I ran out of money. I was broken up with my person at that time. Nicholas was, like, my son was at this point now 10 years old.
Mhm.
He never felt the struggle before, but I wasn't going to make him feel the struggle at a time he could kind of piece together what was actually going on.
Yeah.
So I went and took the position. I negotiated with Vinny at the time, that was his name, that I would be his marketing director and that I would get a salary and that he would train me to be his buyer's agent. And I went into it at what I know, again, now in retrospect, I was always really good at.
Mhm.
You find out what they want and how you can get them what they want, and you'll get what you want. And I found out many years later, that's Zig Ziglar. Like, I didn't know that. I just knew. My grandmother and my grandfather used to call me Rufiana. And that means witch, but witch in the way, like, you know how to sugar somebody up to get what you want, right? But I would always give to get. Now, maybe it wasn't always, on the surface like a gift, but, is it attention? Is it whatever your goals are? How can I give you your goals so I can get what I want? And that's exactly what I did with Vinny. It's exactly what I've done my whole life. So in a good, not manipulative way, like maybe, like if I want candy and you don't want candy as a kid, that's a little different, but I knew that he wanted to start a team. He wanted to become one of the top 10 teams in Douglas Elliman in the Long Island market. He had 2 agents that he could work with. He thought I had talent, and I knew with a budget and he pointing me in the right directions, I'm gonna figure it out, girl. You tell me what you want it to do. You give me the money to make it happen, and I will put the circus together. And that's exactly what he did.
Do you think
So-
he knew that?
What?
Do you think he knew that?
I think he totally knew that, because I
Okay.
still call him now, because I am in the abyss of, this is my invisible assistant sitting right over here. I can't find the figure it out girl. And I call Vinny all the time, like, how did you know I had talent?
Mhm.
And he's like, you just know. When you meet them, you will know. I knew you had talent. I knew to make what I wanted to happen. You were the person to make it happen. And then you broke my heart when you moved to Florida.
Mhm.
And he goes, but I knew you were going to leave me. And that's the lesson he teaches me now. When you find you to do what you need now, they are going to leave you, because the people like you and me take the knowledge and they build on it.
Mhm.
So you need to put the pieces in place, so that person is helping you find the next person. But it's not going to be the one person, because when you find you, they're bigger than you and they're going to move on. And I knew
They
you
call
were
it
gonna
building a bench.
Is that what it's called?
Mhm.
I need to learn more about that.
Well, I can teach you. So,
Will
by the
you?
way, Zig Ziglar offered me a job.
Really?
Yeah. And I had met the woman that I'm now married to at the time. And he wanted me to go out on the road with him and literally be on the road on stage with him 300 days a year. And I couldn't figure out how I was going to court this woman and convince her to marry me while I was on the road 300 days a year. So I ended up turning him down.
Oh
I ended
man.
up turning him
But
down.
you got
So
the girl though, right?
I got the girl. 31 years.
There you go. You still win.
31 years.
Yeah.
31 years. And how she's put up with me this long, I have no idea. So at some point, you make the decision to move to Florida. What's that about?
So me and that ex got back together. I got pregnant with the second baby, and he still had the trucking company. I was now already becoming very successful in real estate. And the trucking company was a major money pit.
Mhm.
And I was not willing to be a single mom a second time at 40 years old with a new baby. And I didn't know what to do, because now I have a career that I'm doing really well at. I'm a new mom again. And then on this hand, we have this business that is failing year after year.
Mhm.
So I wasn't going to, we had to leave the state, or he would have had to work for a competitor as an employee. And he got offered a really good job with the national builder here in Florida. And I would have went to the moon if it meant that I would not have to deal with those trucks anymore, and I wouldn't be a single mom. And that's why I came to Florida.
Gotcha. So you come to Florida, and it sounds like 10 years ago,
7,
7 years ago. Okay.
8, 2017, the middle of 2017.
So you make the transition down there. By the way, I went to Tampa in 2018.
Can you pause for 1 second?
Sure.
I'm sorry. It's I'm in his. Go pick him up. I'm in the middle of a Zoom. Okay, sorry.
It's all right.
He's fighting with me to pick up my son. He's like, I'm on 95. Apologize.
It's okay.
Okay.
It happens.
Okay.
So we're going to go back. So you moved to Florida, and you get into real estate in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
What happens?
I moved to Florida to get into real estate. It's a whole different animal here.
Well, you're not
New
on
York
Vinny's
is
team
a-
anymore, right?
No, I couldn't even be with Douglas Elliman anymore, because the closest Douglas Elliman to where I am was 2 hours south.
Right.
So I had to, smartest thing I did is I got my broker's license here.
Right.
I had enough sales from New York that I took my broker class instead of a salesperson class here. I also learned how to market on a shoestring from
Mhm.
everything I did for the marketing director for Vinny's team. I knew what would make the phone ring for the least amount of money, which I didn't know the first round,
Mhm.
but it was like being a new agent all over again. This I never had to touch a file in New York. You make a deal, it goes to the attorney. Here, we're a title state. Like you're holding that deal from beginning to end. And if you do not have a good process in order, it's going to just fall right through your fingertips.
Right.
So, there was a lot to learn. I got sick when I first moved here. Turns out my second pregnancy was not friends with my heart. So the first year I got here, I really couldn't work. I was trying to work. I didn't know I was sick. I didn't know my market. I didn't know any people. I have to say this about myself. I go into everything bright-eyed, like I'm going to make this happen. And then when it crumbles on my face, I'm not a graceful loser. So I will figure it out for sure, but I will not let my children or my lifestyle suffer once I'm accustomed to something. And I've had already worked up the ladder. So I went and got myself a waiting table job. I got a restaurant job here while I was waiting for my New York license to come over. And I interviewed every restaurant. I said, look, if I can't make $150 at lunch here, you are not the place for me. And I just did that until I found the place that I could make the money I needed while I was figuring out what I was going to do with my business. I also had a 5-month-old baby, a 10-year-old son. Timmy was working full time, and I had a broker's license. So I thought, what can I do? I can be the broker of record for a new construction builder. So let's find a builder that needs a broker of record so that I can make the money that I'm used to making and hang up this tray, because this is not working for me. And then I found out that my heart was like, I needed to go to the doctor. So in the interim, I got a pacemaker. That was a big fat surprise. And I found a broker to hire me that needed to sell 20 townhomes and needed a broker of record. So fixed my heart, went with the builder, stayed with him for a year, sold out the first phase of the 20 townhomes. And I was able to learn my market, build a sphere, take all the lessons I needed to know about owning my own brokership to make this happen. Then I went right back to Remax into general brokerage, and I have nearly doubled my business every year since 2019.
What's the secret to doubling your business every year since 2019?
Double down on where the business comes from.
What does that mean?
That means track your numbers and figure out where you're getting business from. Double down in those lead pillars. And when they're steady, then you move on to the next lead pillar. And then keep moving, and don't be afraid to experiment. I spend a lot of money experimenting, which I don't advise, but I know also when to turn it off to move it to the next experiment. And to always give to get. Always. Like, I love on my past clients, I've built a vendor list that's exhaustive. There are people, even when I don't get to call them, that I know who to call if they need something. So just as much as I have outreach to my past clients, I have a lot of calls incoming from them. They know my kids. They know I'm not a secret. I'm not like, look at my hair. Like, I walk around like this all the time. I am not flashy. I care about my people. I care about my business. I care about my family, and people know that.
Yeah.
And I'll never
You're a
be
resource
shy.
to them.
And I love being a resource.
That's
I love being able to help. I love my guys. I love my vendors. Like, they treat me just as they treat my people well. And I tell them all, you only stay on my list until you mess up that first time. So don't do it. Don't, if there's an accident and if something happens, like,
make it right.
Just make it right and let us know. Don't not show up.
Right.
Don't bang us over the head with the price that's ridiculous, because I'll know.
Right.
And they'll tell me. So and it works. And it really, I love my business. I love my people. I love it here in Florida. And I think I'm on my way I'm so close to peace and freedom. I'm so close. So
So
that's it.
2 questions. Number one, for every seller that's out there in your area in Florida, well, actually any seller period of a home, what's the number one thing that you're seeing that they need to focus on?
What sellers need to focus on in my market
Mhm.
right now?
Well, just period.
Pricing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be competitive on what's happening with your market. And it's not COVID anymore. So you need to really know if you want to sell. If you're testing the market, don't even do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about pricing, you're talking about pricing competitively, right?
Yes.
And one of the things that sellers have a tendency to do is they have a tendency to think about the past when they're looking to sell their property. Past markets don't necessarily influence where your current pricing is.
Not at all.
It's only the current market, right?
Yes.
And so that's something that people need to pay attention to. One of the things that we find a lot, and I'm still in the industry obviously for 33 years, one of the things that we find a lot is people who will price where they think they want to be or where they think they should be versus where the market actually is. And so one of the things that we ask them oftentimes is, when was the last time that you saw a new car on a lot that you thought was overpriced by $10,000 and you went down and looked at it anyway?
Yeah, it's a great
Right?
question.
When was the
That
last
is a
time you
good
got in your
question.
car to go look at something that was that was overpriced by 15 grand?
Well, yeah. And what do they say? They have to be realistic. But let me
Exactly.
ask you this. Do you get, because I'll have people that still are like, well, then I have no room to negotiate. But they're not even coming through the door.
Right.
So what do you mean? Like
Right.
it's
Well, that's where you come in and you say, okay, well, let me ask you a question.
Mhm.
What's 0% of zero? Right? It's
Absolutely.
still zero, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in order to number one, get them in their car, number two, get them out of their car and into your place to see it, what do we need to do? Right? We need to get the most number of eyes, feet, hands in this place as we possibly can, correct? Yes. Okay. Then what
Yeah.
do we need to do in order to get them here? Is it the view that's going to get them here? Is it the neighborhood that's going to get them here? Or is it the price that's going to get them here? Right? Okay. And if you want the maximum number, should you be somewhere where you have maximum attraction? You with me? And so what you're doing is you're literally asking them these questions and they're coming to their own conclusion because of it. So when you're dealing with buyers,
Mhm.
what's the number one thing that you're seeing that buyers need to do that they're not doing?
Be realistic on what they're buying. Like they're not going to get a house for free either.
Yeah.
They need to be educated on what is important. In Florida, what's important is to make sure the home is insurable.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're not buying new construction, we're not worrying about the trim around the door.
Right.
So you need to be realistic and educated on what is most important and affordability. I think that a lot of buyers don't realize that what equates to their monthly payment, and they're very, very shocked. So I've said, listen, you need to think about what your monthly comfort level is before what your pre-approval amount is, because they're going to be very different numbers.
Yeah.
Especially in our area, it's all engineers. These are young kids that are their entry-level houses, $400,000 house, which doesn't happen in a lot of markets, So they really need to understand this is not going to be your forever home. Buy wisely. That's what I do say to a lot of buyers. This is not, you have to take the emotion out of this. This is a business deal. So you can't think about just, buying the house. You have to love where you live, but the resaleability is also, especially for the young people, it's not your last house.
Right.
So you have to really think about that.
And you have to start somewhere, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Like a bunch of the houses that my parents bought when we were kids, they bought and they had 20-year-old wallpaper. They had 30-year-old tile on the floor. And some of them were just obnoxious, right? And I can tell you that because I was the guy that ended up with the task of taking the wallpaper off the walls. I was the guy with the task of taking of digging the area that the jacuzzi, equipment went into, right? And I had to use a pickaxe to do it because the dirt out here is awful. I was the guy that had to help chip up the tile that just was the most obnoxious thing you ever saw in your life. My parents bought those places and then turned around and fixed them up while they were there, before they moved in and then while they lived there, and then turned around and sold them obviously for a profit later and that kind of thing. I just want people to understand that you're not going to buy the Taj Mahal where you're going to live for the rest of your life the first time necessarily. Some people will, but not everybody. The vast majority of us need to be realistic about this is a 1-bedroom, 1-bath condo.
Yeah.
Right. And we need to buy it and we need to start building equity and we need to start doing our thing, right, as a homeowner. And then we can move up later. Right.
Yeah.
Just keep our eye on the market, keep our eye on what's going on. Yeah. So the conversation you're having with buyers and with sellers probably has a lot to do with interest rates. As we tape this, interest rates have come down a little bit, but they're still pretty high comparatively, right, in terms of historical numbers. So what does that conversation sound like when you're talking to them about this is where the market is currently in terms of interest rates?
So, well, where we're at right now is we're hovering between 6 and 6.5, depending on if it's, government backed, FHA, VA, or conventional.
Right.
Lenders are also being very competitive right now because of it. And in part of our county is a high predominant of new construction,
Right.
which is a huge thing because the D.R. Hortons of the nation own the DHI mortgage. So you could take $25,000 right off the number of the house in order to even compete with that. So I'm talking to both buyers and sellers. By not being emotional, you need to, as a seller, offer some sort of concession so you can keep yourself comparable, especially if you're in close proximity to these builders. And the buyers, I say, don't get emotionally attached because I know I can get you concessions outside of this whole commission business. Like there's, 10 on a 350 house, $10,000 are going to pay your closing costs. But if you can get the full 6%, you're getting your closing costs and a rate buy down. I just got somebody in a house today, conventional rate buy down, full closing costs at 6%. I think her monthly payment's like $2,200. Prevailing market on that same house is $2,600 to $2,700 a month. So who you hire matters to really understand on both sides. And it also, and I feel this way, even in the deals with the buyers and sellers out there, you're negotiating. It's a skills-based market, first of all. So you have to know what you're talking about and you need to be able to talk to both people. And the end game is finding the mutual beneficial point for everybody. And there is one. There totally is one. And it really comes down to motivation and education. And if we can present that as the business professionals, everybody's going to get what they want. The interest rates, I'm in the school of thought that if we do see them go a little lower, we're never going to see lower than high 5s. I think the sweet spot's going to stay about 6. We'll probably see a dip by the end of the year like we normally do. But I think the guy who made the executive decision to go to 3% and give away free money is the guy who should really be in trouble right now, because those are the people that are suffering. There are at least 3 families in the last quarter that I told them not to sell their house. Let's rent your house, hold your house. You're going to get 75% of that as income towards your next loan. I know you don't want to be a landlord, but you're going to eat it. Maybe you eat $1,200 for the year for being a little bit under of what the rent to mortgage ratio is, but you're going to be $25,000 under if we sell this house, and you're not going to get that house anyway. So just hang tight, get a property manager, let it sit there. And you could still get the house that you want. And that is really something people need to explore, especially when you're sitting on 2.5% interest rate.
So in real estate, when you're a seller, like you're talking about, how important is it, do you think, that they take the emotion out as much as they possibly can?
Super important. And it's on both sides. And it's hard to get them there. And they're still going to teeter. They're still gonna, if they've been in the house for 20 years, there's so many things that is just psychological emotions that are gonna come up. You haven't sold or bought a house in 20 years. It's a very different world from 20 years ago.
Yeah, it is.
Your kids grew up in that house, or your mother lived in that house, or whatever
Your
memories.
water broke in that house. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Anything that went on, that you can't detach from that. That's inherent to who you are. So that's a really hard thing to get them to where they have to be. I have a lady that right now she's 95. Like, she can't live alone anymore. She's been in that house for 30 years. We have been talking for months. She is not ready to leave that house. Her daughter has moved in. So many times I've done everything but and you can only do so much in those situations. If they are not ready to sell, they're not ready to sell.
Yeah.
If it becomes, you need to be able to ask the questions so that they can tell you why they're ready to sell.
Yeah.
You lose it the second you tell them why they have to sell. Like with the old lady, she needs to sell for her safety and for her comfort for the rest of her life, for her daughter's mental health, for all of it. She needs to sell. But me telling them that means nothing.
Yeah.
So
they have to come to that themselves. And life has to present something that makes them go, oh, you know what? I need to do this. And again, it's the emotional thing, right? There's something that's going to happen that's going to affect them emotionally, that's going to make them decide, okay, it's time. What you want to do as the real estate professional is just be there, right?
Yeah.
You're more of a counselor than you are anything else. And you're just kind of a support structure. You're just kind of there for whatever they need.
Yeah.
And when they're ready, you want to be the number one call. You want to be the person that's there to help. So listen, I really, really appreciate you being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. This has been an amazing, well, actually almost a couple of hours now.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. This has really been a lot of fun.
It has been. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.